Are you there, Bob?
Hello. Hello, everybody. I am here. Welcome to another episode of the Hazmat Guys Roundtable. This is going to be different because I'm going to be one of your many co-hosts tonight, Bob Koshignow, aka Kosh. Bobby and Mike are on special assignment. We can't tell you where. They will be back next month. They're deep undercover right now. We'll just leave that right there. And we have many guests on the show tonight. Everybody, please introduce yourself. Go around the table so the picture pops up. Ben.
Ben Herskowitz, and I'm trying to work all the technology here at the same time, so I apologize if my gaze is asunder.
Jay-Z.
Jeff Zentek, still in my same place in Arizona. Glad you guys showed up tonight. Hope we have a good topic. Hope we have a good talk.
Still looking marvelous as ever, my friend. I got to say, retirement is doing much better for you than it is for me. I'm a little fatter and whatever.
Well, I gotta tell you that it took me about 2 hours to do my hair, and then these headphones aren't doing my hair any justice at all. So something's gonna have to change. I'm not really sure.
We'll have to work on that. We'll have to work on that, bro.
Yeah.
Chris Fath.
It's been way too much representation from the nice warm world of Florida and Arizona. We actually have to get some cold weather up here in the Northwest, where I've got a foot of snow out there at the PHRT International headquarters. I'm honored and excited to be here.
I am a little bit of an ass because I did send Chris some pictures earlier of my thermostat, which I think it said 78 degrees. And I was going to send you a picture of me sitting in a jacuzzi in the cold water with a cigar, but I chose not to do that because I'm not that bad a guy. Adam McFadden, you're next.
Good morning, everybody. Adam here from the Great White North up in Toronto. Listening to Chris here talk about how cold it is. It's kind of humorous in my opinion, but again, we're about -10 here a couple days ago. That's in Celsius, by the way, gentlemen. So hopefully you can all get on the same page by the end of tonight's podcast about that.
That's pretty damn cold, bro. I'm not gonna lie. I spent a few years, as everybody knows, up in the Northeast before my father moved us down to the Sunshine State, and thank God he did. With that, so we got a great topic tonight. We're going to be talking about PPE selection. We've got a whole host of ways we're going to approach this. But first, Ben has an announcement. Hit it, Ben.
Hey, I'm not sure if it shows up in the because there's a link in it. I posted a comment on YouTube, and I'll eventually try and get around to posting it onto Facebook. There's a link, so if you can see it, someone just type, "I see the link." Otherwise, I'll work on a workaround. That link should take you to a short quiz that at some point in tonight's show will give you a 4-digit code, so you actually have to watch the content, not just go take the test as many times as you want till you get the right answer. And it'll email you back a certificate for 1 credit hour for discussion of the topic at hand, which is basically PPE selection and kind of working through the process of doing that. So if you can see it, great. If you can't see it, not so great, but let me know. We'll try to fix it.
Perfect. Yeah, so on the topic of PPE selection, we're going to talk about, we'll start off with some of the basics, but then we're going to go into how you should, why you should, and then there's some training issues where there's operational people training in level A suits, and in some instances, some of the training that's been out there is where they're actually working on leaks and stuff like that. And so we're gonna talk about the PPE selection. We'll talk a little bit about the 470 mission specific, and we'll kind of go down that trek. But we'll start it off with Ben. Go ahead.
All right. So the first thing at hand is how we describe PPE. There's a bit of a push. We've commonly used what we'll affectionately call the EPA method of level A, level B, level C, and level D. And there's a push to change that to the NFPA, which is 1991, 1992, 1994. And then 1994 is broken up into different classes. There's a few reasons. One of the reasons is that level A, B, C, and D are not superbly descriptive. They basically describe generalized features, not necessarily the standard to which a suit meets. So I could make a level A suit that is vapor tight for water and ambient air, and so that is a vapor tight suit, but it doesn't protect me from chlorine or ammonia or any of that other stuff. And for example, level B, like, a poncho with an SCBA, is that a level B? Like, it provides some splash protection, but does it really meet a standard? And so NFPA, of course, has a huge list of testing requirements, durability, things like that. So thoughts on the change between just A, B, C, and D to actually talking about suits that meet a standard. So that'd be the first part of the topic.
Chris.
Oh wait, I'm up. I'm sitting there listening to Ben go through all this, and the first thing that came to my mind is who is setting that jurisdictional authority. You look at the EPA and their levels of protection of A, B, C, and D. What does the EPA care about? What do they worry about and focus about? They don't think about fire. They think about chemicals. And obviously hazardous materials is chemicals, but there's a whole suite of hazards above and beyond that. And especially for the firefighters in the house, fire is one of the big aspects that we've seen with issues with this. NFPA 1994 looked at addressing this, and now we at least have an authority that's looking at it from a fire background, but that's not the main focus of those NFPA classifications. It's more with CBRN type of events, and that's where there's been a little bit of constraint within the field between the EPA and what these NFPA classifications for CBRN type of classifications of PPE are. And with that, you do see some conflicts, and there's been some podcasts and discussions, and there's arguments up and down, left and right, just in that basic fact, not even getting into bunker gear and all those other NFPAs as well. So it does make it very difficult for a responder to identify specifically and exactly what their form of PPE they should be purchasing, and more importantly, what they should be wearing when they end up going into a hot zone, depending on what the hazard is or depending on what the situation is.
Good point. Good point. Jeff.
Well, I think cleaning up this level A, level B, NFPA 1991, 92, I think that's a good thing for us because it does get more specific. 1991, you have a specific definition for that garment. Same with 92, and then 94 gets a little bit complicated by the actual levels. But one thing we always have to remember is that we can only use what we have in our cache. So
right,
you may have, we never had a certified 1994 garment. We had a jet guard, which was a good 1994 similar garment, but it didn't hold the standard. Honestly, the only reason they have the standard is because they have been through the testing process, and a lot of those companies don't want to do that because it's massively expensive. But PPE selection is based on what you have, and if you only had, like we only had, not counting our bunker gear, we really only had 3 choices, so it made it kind of easy.
Right.
And we never ever had a situation where we didn't have the right PPE. It was a matter of making the right selection. So I think this will be a great discussion, and that would be my only thing is keep in mind of you can only have what you have on your rig.
Very true. Very true. Adam.
The big challenges that I see when it comes to NFPA 91 going to 94, and exactly what Chris was saying, moving from the understanding, are you dealing with toxic industrial chemical response or into more of a CBRNE response where you need more dexterity, more movement, and other, more tactics-based response that needs to occur downrange. That's going to be a little bit different than that of a normal chemical spill in a fixed facility. So when it comes to not just understanding what the what type of suit a team should choose based on the equipment that they have on their rig, it's an understanding of what tactic needs to take place. Are they shutting off a valve above their head or below their waist? how are we going to adequately, suit up a responder, whether they're a technician or operations level, and have an understanding of how to properly choose the appropriate glove that goes within that B ensemble, for example, and then even the appropriate boots, whether it's a tingly, a Bata boot, or the specific polymer that's required. And the things that we see is when we're trying to identify these products on scene, and then looking at the suit selection that we have, whether it's only a couple to choose from, sometimes I see a gap and almost a delay in the tactic that we want to move forward because we're not quite sure what suit we should wear. So, looking at the changes with the NFPA, going from something that's bulkier, less flexible, to something that's more mobile that we can conduct more tactics in, is usually at the front of my mind when we're on a hazmat event. We need to get the job done, and we need to choose the appropriate suit to do that.
You bring up a good point, and we're kind of jumping ahead just a little bit, but my guys recently had, I believe it was a sulfuric acid incident, if I'm not mistaken, but regardless, it was an acid incident. And the lieutenant had called me and he said, hey, after the fact, and he said, hey, what's your thoughts on this? And I said, well, why didn't you wear level A? And he said, well, we did the NT94 because it's the same as a level A. And I went, whoa, let's stop right there, because it's not. And this is the big misnomer that's out there, because it's like I told him, I said, what are you worried about? What's going to hurt us? And he said, respiratory protection. I said, okay, is that air pack going to make it through the acidic environment that you're in without being protected? And he's like, oh shit, you're right. So, and I'm not knocking MT94 by any means. However, I think they have their place, whether it's RIT, rescue team, whatever the terminology is that we're using today. But we also got to remember the fact is we have a mission we have to go do. We have a job to take care of. We may be getting into product. And is your SCBA compatible with what you're dealing with? And more often than not, it's not going to be. So in that case, you need to be in a totally encapsulated suit. Thoughts?
I think, well, real quick, I didn't see anybody say they saw the link, so I'm assuming it got blocked out.
I did not see it.
Yep. There's a QR code right here. And
there you go.
If you want to type in, it's tinyurl.com/2025 RTCEU. So you're welcome to do that. We'll figure out how to get it in the links. But there's a few factors. So one, obviously, an excellent point that was brought up about risk-based response, right? Circumstance drives most of it, followed by facts and science. Like those are the three components that make that up. One of the things I look at, because I'm more not anti-level A, but I look at the things that I think kill responders or injure responders, and the chemical usually isn't it. It's usually heat exhaustion, slip, trip, fall / walk into when you're unfortunately wearing this big bulky suit. You go to look to the left, you're looking at the left side of the suit. You're looking to see your feet. And part of that is we almost killed a guy when he fell off a roof trying to navigate a parapet ladder in a 1991 level A garment. And so obviously, yes, you do need to provide chemical protection, but on the SCBA side, it has been, and this is like gray area, it has been tested. Are you going to get an SCBA manufacturer to say, well, we authorize it for use in hazmat, we've tested it against all these other things? And that, my experience has been no. However, let's just take a look at what all the materials are that we are already exposing it to in terms of smoke or vehicle fires or all of that stuff. And so there is a balance. And I think some of that is, as part of recon, is figuring out where that line is. And I don't profess to have that answer, but I think part of the risk-based response is weighing all the risks. I might take a risk on the SCBA and maybe take it out of service and have it recertified if it's 110 degrees middle of summer and that 1994 suits lets my guys get in, get out, as opposed to the fully encapsulated garment where now I got to pull a guy out because of heat exhaustion. And again, every circumstance is different. That's kind of just my 2 cents.
Very good points. Jeff.
Well, I think Adam made a really good point. Talking about making sure that the PPE matches the objective. And I've always, I've always stated that, and we kind of go by that in terms of, what are we doing? Are we working, is this stuff on the ground or is it above us? So, to me, that kind of dictates a little bit what we would do. I'm kind of with Ben too. I says, most of the chemicals that we deal with are not going to be good for the SCBA anyways. In terms of, certain chemicals, I try and use the best for the job, for the objective. I mean, I always give this example, using level A for, well, let's say, using level B for, let's just say, hydrogen fluoride is wrong, is completely wrong. Using let's say a level A for carbon monoxide isn't wrong, but it's not the best effective use of it.
Right.
So we take all of that into account, and then, like Ben said, a lot of the chemicals aren't good for it anyways. So I am going to side on, especially if we have a long drawn-out process, I don't want my guys to get too worked up. So,
But like you said, it's a risk-based response depending on what you're dealing with. If I'm sending my guys into an acidic atmosphere, and I know I'm sending it into an acidic atmosphere, it's hot as hell here in FLA and humid. I know I'm going to have to change out more crews.
Right.
But that's what it comes down to:
talking,
risk-based response. Bottom line.
Yeah, and if we're talking using level A for sulfuric acid, for example, it's not wrong. It's completely not wrong.
Right.
Using turnout gear for sulfuric acid, wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you know what? A lot of people do it, and they say, well, it's it'll keep the vapors off of us. It'll keep not necessarily keep the vapors off us, but it'll keep the liquid off us if you splash it. But then again, you're degrading your stuff you use to fight fire. Also, you're hanging it in the cab, usually where you're at. So those are two negatives for that. And we have this big giant truck that follows us to these calls that has all this really cool equipment on it. Frickin' use it.
Yeah.
Use it when it's needed. So
Yep.
Like I say, some uses of, I had some times where guys pull the safety card on me and they say, we want to go in level A on this, and I was like, okay, it's not wrong. You're not going to like it, but level B, non-encapsulated is perfectly right for this situation. They go, well, I just want to be in level A. It's like, okay, if you want to be a part of this, because you're integral in this, then okay. I mean, it's only happened once, and there was issues with it, but anyways, that's kind of my thought on it.
Good deal, Chris.
Like what Jeff was saying right there, I am reminded yesterday we ended up doing PPE training for my agency. We're getting guys into the MT94s or 1994 compatible suits with a specific brand to make sure that they get comfortable with it. And the final offer that I ended up providing them is just like Jeff was saying, you need to make sure as an entrant and the hazmat group soup and the entry team lead, they need to have a comfort with what that level of PPE is going to protect, whether it be bunker gear and STBA, whether it be a non-encapsulated level B or a class 1, class 2, class 3R, however we want to call it, or even a level A, you want to make sure that when you're going into the hot zone that you have comfort that PPE is going to protect you, knowing the ins and out of that from previous training and understanding and taking a look at the permeation data. I ended up doing some research a few years back on PPE because we had a significant restriction up in the Pacific Northwest that if our SCBA cannot be deemed certified against a chemical, you have to wear totally encapsulated protective clothing, which, even though HAZWOPER says for unknowns, you start with level B and then you do the risk-based response and identify what level of PPE you need after that. We had to go level A up here in my corner of the country just because of that flat out law and SCBA manufacturers not providing a statement of standard of what their SCBA was resistant to. So I ended up doing research with Dr. Christina Baxter, and we ended up changing the state law after we found out some of the findings. And Bob, you sat there and talked about that event with the sulfuric acid. It cracked me up when I'm sitting there taking a look at the information that I got for these for the most common CBRN type of SCBAs and what they're resistant to. And the original project selection from this third-party testing agency had a whole suite of chemicals very similar to what level A's are tested to at the 1991 standard. They have ammonia, chlorine, sulfuric, and nitric acid. And NFPA class 1s are tested against ammonia, chlorine, sulfuric acid, acrolein, and a few others. And the final project battery that they decided to test the SCBAs against in a full test method was ammonia, chlorine, and methyl chloride. Not so they removed sulfuric acid. I'm like, that's an interest. After you brought that up, I just had to take a quick look on my previous notes. Like, interesting how they removed that. So it comes on down to even on a splash protection, you may need to go encapsulated, whether it be level B or level A, and identify what that risk is. But it still goes back to identifying what you're going to do. Depending on what that mission is, like Adam spoke about, our dexterity, our mobility. If we're doing a straight up front forward job, we want to make sure we have the highest level and degree of safety. But sometimes that dexterity, the communication, the fogging up of the inside of our suit can be a detriment as well. But of course, we're not going to downgrade our PPE just because of comfort, just because of an ease of use, just because I don't
Right.
want to do pre and post entry medical checks, or it's too hot of a day or too cold of a day. We're just going to go bunker gear and SCBA. We want to make sure that we select the proper PPE based on what that chemical is that we're expected to find within that hot zone.
That's perfect, and we're not going to. Maybe that'll be a subject for next month. But you mentioned pre and post medical, and I always joke with people. I'm like, do we do that before we go into a fire? But that's a whole nother topic for a whole another series. So let me ask this question: what do you guys think of training operational level responders to operate in level A and actually doing technician skills, i.e., putting a band clamp on or stuff like that? Because there's different entities out there that do that, and they always fall back to the mission specific. And I know one department that uses mission specific. Mission specific is like their way to do everything. It's like you might as well just have a hazmat team. Thoughts?
Well, it's the issue is I think people take rules and of course they're always going to stretch them. So like, I don't think, and someone can certainly correct me, right? The best way to find out if you're wrong is post something to the internet with confidence, but there is not mitigation as a hazmat ops. There's no specialty for that. Like the product control specialty or mission specific is still defensive. And so the only real offensive piece is victim rescue, which is known victim, known location, known chemical. And so I think you see people take that mission specific and they hear a word and then they don't know what it means, and so they apply it. I think that that OSHA, which of course is, or your state's version thereof, as well as the EPA, who basically said we adopt 1910-120, they made it pretty clear that operations folks are primarily in the cold zone. Now, there are some gray area exceptions. For example, they go into a structure fire, that's a hot zone. They are able to make entry for the purposes of putting out propane or other flammable liquid fires. And so there is some of that crossover, but I think people take, it's when, like you give a mouse a cookie, and I think they just stretch it beyond what it was intended.
Yeah, and I've read through the NFPA 470, and I know people that are on the committee and whatever, as you all do. And I think there's, as you said, there's interpretations. And going through that, I have not seen, and please correct me if I'm wrong. My wife will tell you it's not going to be the first time I'm wrong because I'm wrong quite a bit. My kids will tell you the same thing. But I have not seen anything in there that says you can train an operational level spawner in a level A suit and have them perform technician skills, i.e., putting a band clamp or something like that on a leak.
And I think
I was going to say the same thing. I've never seen or heard of that. I actually don't. If they ever said that hey, we're going to do mission specific for operations level, I would be categorically against it. There's
Right.
too many factors. Well, you just mentioned it. You know, I mean, then you have to teach them how to, you know, use some of the equipment that we have, and it just gets too deep. Just, you know, let's not cheapen it. Make it a hazmat technician. You got.
You either are or you're not.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, mission specific is great for, you know, guys that want to, you know, use meters in certain areas just to get an idea, or decon's great, you know, because you add to your team, you know, for, you know, making decon. But once you start crossing that line of the real technical stuff, I don't know. I think you just open the door to too many problems.
Yeah, you're inviting a disaster. Real quickly, we have Joe Perez online. He said that our CBRN suits specifically say they're not meant for IDLH, so they're basically decon suits and nothing else. And then he chimed, Adam hit him back with a good reply, and then Joe just came back and said our department lives on the fact that mission-specific ops-level firefighter can work under the supervision of a technician in NFPA 470.
I might speak to that, Bob, if I can.
Please.
We need to look at the big picture when it comes to what a hazmat technician's overall responsibilities are when they arrive on scene. We know the biggest issue with many departments is staffing. So if we have a large mass casualty event, toxic industrial chemical, spill at a fixed facility, lots of casualties, lots of fire department or hazmat staff on scene. When it comes to overseeing the different sectors, we've seen many agencies that will take the technician role and have that put into, the decon sector officer, your hazmat safety officer, some of your downrange strategy management of what is taking place within the event itself, while the operations responders are the one actually doing the task. Being overseen by those technicians, your equipment cache and equipment that needs to be utilized on an event. Many of you know that an operations level responder may not be as familiar as where that equipment is on our heavy HAVs or our support vehicles to get them off, to get them into play, while getting them suited up to go down range to actually complete the task might be a better option. I've seen it with multiple departments. So when we look at the expertise that we bring as a technician, it comes with also managing the scene and not just plugging a leak. So I can see it both ways.
That's a great point. And unfortunately, I'm gonna put the hazmat lieutenant hat on for a second and think of what the chief officer would say or chief of department and go, you know what? I don't have to have as many hazmat technicians because I can have this guy be mission specific and be overseen by a hazmat technician. Well, first off, do you even have that many hazmat technicians on a scene? I mean, unless you're like Bobby and Mike's department or Jeff's, or I mean, mine was pretty good because we got 520 guys, but not all 520 technicians. I can tell you that right now. I think there was like 65 for all three shifts. If you're in that kind of scenario, I think what's going to happen is you're going to have chief officers go, well, I can, and this is the key word, I can get away with this. And when we get away with something, we put people in danger.
Well, a few things to that. Like, certainly, right? Everyone's like, well, it's not a crime till you're caught. And I'm like, well, or it's not illegal till you're caught. Well, really, it's not illegal until you're caught, convicted, and run out of appeals. That doesn't make it a good idea. It really doesn't make it a good idea. And I would like to just go back to something that was posted about. They said that their CBRN suits are specifically not meant for IDLH. I don't know those particular manufacturers, but for example, that's one of those questions, for example, why, and I know it's not for everyone. In fact, all of the NFPA standards that exist, there's not a suit that's been made yet. But for example, the 1994 Class 1 garments, for example, the ones that we own, well, all garments that are NFPA 1994 Class 1 are basically, of the chemicals they're checked to, it's 10,000 parts per million, as opposed to an NFPA 1991 garment, which is tested to 1,000,000 parts per million. And so, for example, since chlorine is one of those chemicals, 10,000 parts per million is way higher than the 10, which is the ideal H for chlorine. So our particular suits would meet that. And I think one of the issues when we look at like operations folks trying to do some of this work is they're not necessarily familiar with the whole process
Right.
by which to select suits. So, for example, again, another NFPA standard, 1891, kind of walks you through the process. And it's like, well, is it flammable? Yes or no? Well, if it's flammable, right, it walks you through, is it skin toxic? Yes or no? And then it says, okay, well, is it flammable? So, like, when are the times that it would be appropriate to use turnout gear on a hazmat entry? What do you guys think?
I will tell you, in 30 years of being in the fire service, I was in a level A suit. It's a very small amount of times. And, this is what I'm getting ready to say is not, well, Koch said this. I would say 80% of the stuff that we dealt with, we could handle, if nothing else, the initial recon in bunk gear and SCBA.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been in a level A suit, maybe, less than 10 times. But I think what's happened is our research has gotten so much better that we can do
Absolutely.
a lot of stuff that in the stuff that the other stuff we have. Now, do we do hazmat assignments in bunker gear? Absolutely. I've done several tanker transfers and I'm in bunker gear. That's a hazmat incident. We go on natural gas leaks 50 times a day. Some people don't consider natural gas as hazardous materials, but it's a hazmat. So, obviously the flammability characteristic comes in play, and here's the thing with our gear too. One thing we have to remember is sometimes we do stuff like take for example, if I got splashed with some diesel or some gasoline when doing a transfer, that's cost of doing business. I'm going to get new turnouts. That's all there is to it. The biggest thing is that we have to report that. But if somebody says, well, what if you get splashed? You need to be in this. I'm like, I'm not going to get splashed. Or maybe, the chances are really low. But I'd rather be in bunker gear than I would be in level A. And if I get splashed, or I walk through it with my boots, there's a good chance that I'm just going to throw that stuff away and get new gear. So there's a cost to the hazmat incident. For us, we never recovered the cost. It was just the price of doing business. Other teams do. They get cost recovery from the people that had the incident, and that's a good thing as well. So it's just one of those things. If it happens, it happens. But as long as you're in the right gear, and everybody agrees in it, the safety officer buys off on it, incident commander buys off on it, good to go. Because there's usually a lot of people there. If somebody says, I don't agree with that, then you just explore it from there, and you have you beat the hell out of that guy until he says, okay, I'm good.
I think a lot of that, well, first off, like the cost thing, because we have people that go, well, turnout gear is expensive. And I'm like, have you purchased a NFPA 1991 certified level A garment? And they're like, well, no. And I'm like, the turnout gear is the cheaper option. If you're concerned about cost, and the lead times are almost, well, turnout gear is a little bit longer, but like from a cost standpoint, they're about the same. But I think with a lot of this, and the same thing with like, does it protect the SCBA or not? Even before the flow chart that's in the 1891 standard, which is pretty long, it's like 4 pages, but they're big bubbles, so it's easy to read for people that have glasses like me. But before that, we had a flow chart, and it basically went through like is it skin toxic? Yes or no? If yes, well then I need vapor protection, and then depending upon, do I need vapor protection above or below 10,000 parts per million? And then the next question is it also flammable? Well, I guess flammability, sorry, is the first one. Is it flammable? Yes or no? If yes, has to be turnout gear. It's the only thing we have to protect us against flame, right? And then the next question is it also flammable, or is it skin toxic vapors? And you're like, well, if yes and also flammable, well, then you have to figure out how to change the environment or some other way to solve the problem. And then, of course, you work down to, is it a splash hazard? Well, even with level B garments, for me, the difference between whether I protect the SCBA or not is, do I expect to find the material being thrown at me, or am I walking through it? So I would venture a guess, and certainly, again, someone in the comments or after the fact who's smarter than me, I'd bet they took off sulfuric acid off that list for the SCBA, because the expectation is if you're having it rain down on you, that's a reason to wear a garment that that protects the SCBA. If I'm walking through a vapor, like the vapor pressure of sulfuric acid, I believe, is pretty low, isn't it? So the likelihood of that jumping out and climbing on the SCBA is lower. And so I think that selection process, that's not taught, at least I'm not familiar with it being taught, in an ops class, which is another reason why you can't be like mission specific. Well, in fact, NFPA goes so far as you can't just say mission specific, you have to have training in an SOP or SOG, whereas the tech side says teach really good risk assessment and do a risk-based response. So, and before I forget here, because we're getting near the end, the code for tonight is 1992. So if you follow the link, get my hand out of the way.
There you go.
And you want to get some CEUs, there's a short test. I think we managed to cover all the things we have to cover. But this is one of those topics that we could probably talk for 2 or 3 hours, and we'll all have slightly different opinions. And that's okay, because what we encounter in Pennsylvania, temperature, humidity, is very different than what Jeff finds in Arizona. And
that's a dry heat, though. Just ask him.
It's just a dry heat, right? But we also have like staffing things, like reading some of the comments, like many times technicians are being used for overseeing activities. And it's like, well, like, can that be handled? Should it be handled? You know, I mean, the incident commander is not necessarily a technician, and he's the one that's handling arguably all of it. So I think it's just one of these topics we don't give it a lot of thought to, like, what is the process? I know for our organization, the PPE selection process has always been kind of flowchart driven to make sure that people are asking the right questions. Because, like, we have multiple suits that are made of the same material. So we have encapsulating and non-encapsulating, and you have to account for, it's not just about breakthrough time, it's breakthrough time and do the features of the suit fit the mission, which I think was an excellent point that Adam brought up.
Yep, very good. And that is going to bring us to another conclusion. But before we leave, let's go around the round table. See what I did there? And Jeff, where can we reach you? Where are we going to see you coming up?
Well, actually, I'm going to be at Massachusetts for that hazmat conference. And by any chance, if you're in Stratford-upon-Avon, the UK, I'll be doing a conference there in May, I believe.
Nice.
And then Midwest, obviously, one of my favorite conferences, because my good buddy Rick is there. Be there. If you want to get a hold of me, you know, I'm on Facebook, Hazmat Response, and you can email me at hurt1173@gmail if you want to contact me about something. And there's multiple ways, but those are the best. So
we'll get you to him. We promise.
Oh yeah. Some by hook or by crook. So good discussion. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of good information.
Yeah, like Ben said, we could go for hours. Chris, where can we see you next? Your contact info and whatever else you want to throw out there.
Absolutely. As I'm sitting there just reviewing my waterproof emergency response guidebook available over at hazmatrescue.com. Ben talked about sulfuric acid and its low vapor pressure. If I sit here and look at this great chart that's in the back of Jeff's amazing book, the vapor pressure of sulfuric acid of 0.001 millimeters of mercury. When I look at it right there, it's pretty much a rock. So this is a great quick field guide right there. So yeah, check me out over at Hazmat and Rescue, over at all the social medias at Hazmat and Rescue, and in person, I'm going to be going on over to the great state of Oklahoma in March for their
Yes.
amazing conference with you and with Adam and a few other great friends. They got us putting in a lot of work. I know all of us are putting a lot of classes in there. A lot of great presentations. That's an amazing conference. And if I recall correctly, that is free to any responder. All you got to do is figure out a way to get there and contact them, and they will provide you awesome free training with all of the great presentations out there.
Awesome. Adam, you're next. Where can we get a hold of you and what are you doing?
Well, first off, I just want to say I'm disappointed. Nobody asked me for being up here in Canada. If we just simplified our hazmat response and we wear snowsuits going down range for all of our maple syrup spills on the side of the major highways up here. But no, again.
Next time, pal. Next time. Next time.
I'll be with my partner in crime, Chris Pfaff, there at Hazmat and Rescue. We're going to be in Oklahoma doing a couple of training sessions together, some battery classes, again, with our good friend Patrick Durham at Stash Training. So looking forward to seeing everybody down there. And then Massachusetts, of course, another great hazmat conference. But check us out on Instagram at Firehouse Training. Of course, TikTok. You won't see me doing any hazmat dances there, but lots of good content there for everybody when it comes to dealing with hazardous materials events, training, and other things that we do up here in the Great White North.
Mr. Ben.
Well, see, I still have to do a lot of working for a living. I can't attend all the conferences, but you can find me around. Although, whereas some of the conferences you have to figure out how to get there. If you'd like to catch me and learn about radiation, your tax dollars already paid for it. You go down to the Center for Domestic Preparedness and take the RERO class, Radiological Emergency Response Operations, and you don't get a refund in your taxes if you don't take it. So you already paid for it. You might as well sign up for it. It's a week-long class down at the at FEMA Center for Domestic Preparedness, live agent class. Lots of fun.
Awesome. Thanks. And you can catch me and my cohorts. Let's see. Coming up, we've got Michigan Conference, Massachusetts Conference, Oklahoma Conference. Have not got confirmed, but I think Baltimore and hell, we're all over the place. So thank you guys for joining in. Again, we are deeply missing our other normal cohorts, Bobby and Mike. I'm sure they're, as I said, deep in research for their next mission. And we appreciate the opportunity to keep this show going on. And as Bobby always says, see you next Tuesday. Not really. Take care.